Hello everyone, this is Israel Reese, and in this video we are going over a question that Damien Winter asked about how to send gesture input to a separate kinematic body 2D player object, etc. This is a very good question and one of those questions I had as a beginner as well. So I am very happy to answer it for you. Even though you didn't commission it, I'm making it anyway. This is for you. Merry Christmas. And also, before we start, I want to say Damien Winter, that is an freaking awesome name. I love that name. Very cool name. Without further, I can't talk. Welcome to my ASMR. Without further ado, let's get into the tutorial. So basically, the backstory to this video is Damien has a question about my TouchScreenClass tutorial, and yes, that video is very outdated and I regret decisions that were made. I'm going to remake it eventually, I swear I will, but this video should help in the meantime. Basically, this is an example of me using it in a game I could build, and after doing this it is kind of fun, so maybe I will do something with it. But let's get started. So here we have the scene. What we have is the touch screen class, and notice it is not underneath the player. That's because the player, if we put it underneath there, then when we move the player around, the touch screen area also moves. So we will have this up here. The player is a rigid body 2D. I know you asked for, you used the example of kinematic body. That it could work. But for this example, I'm using rigid body just because it's fun to watch it bounce around the screen. Alternatively, you could code your own system of physics, basically, but this will work for now. Then we have sprite, collision shape, and static body with collision polygon surrounding it, so it doesn't fly off screen. So what are we doing in code? That's the important part. And I think your question, what you mean by your question isn't just sending data from one node to the other. It's more to do with functions, and more specifically the return function, or I guess you wouldn't call it a function, just return, the keyword return. So if we go into the touch screen class, we can see we have several functions. We have the signals down here. The other tutorial explains it. I'll link it in a card and in the description. But what we want to look at is down here in the get drag direction. We can see we pass it arguments. Now, it seems simple, but it just really helps having someone there to explain it. So I know what your question is, because I had the same question is what I'm saying. So basically, functions, right? They're this thing, this word, and then we have parentheses at the end. Now we can pass the function arguments, data, variables. In this case, we're passing it the drag and then the drag margin. This is the margin for error, and this is the drag direction we're sending it, and that's the event, which you saw in the other video was the event relative, and then the margin of error is 3. So yeah, you pass it arguments, and then you can use these variables in this function, not in the entire script. So if I have two variables called drag, so if I made var drag, and I made it equal some text, right? Godot, see, it says variable drag already defined in the scope at line 10. So how do we change this? Let's say this was over here, right? I'm just running through the scenario with you, so just try and follow along. You'll get it. Var drag right here. Okay, so if we put that up there, notice how there isn't an error. That's strange. Godot can do this, or the language can do this, and that is kind of confusing because now we have two variables, so I can access this one and this one, but Godot doesn't differentiate it. So what you would do if you wanted to access the home variable drag and this variable drag is you could do self and then drag, and it knows that it's talking about this drag, not this one. If you wanted to use this one, you would just type drag. Okay, so that's part of your question. I'm going a little more in depth. I'm just explaining all of it so you can understand everything. There's to know about this, because that's probably something you may not know if you're starting. And this is also part of your question. Since the node isn't underneath this one, we're getting our parent, and then we get the node TouchScreenClass. Alternatively, if the TouchScreen class was underneath our node, then we could just use the money symbol and access it like any other node. But it is not, because we don't want it flying around the screen, so we're doing this. Also, what you could do to get the variable from another node is, if it was a regular variable up here, and this works too, is var export node path. Okay, so then what we could do when we click on this TouchScreenClass, now we have that script variable and we can assign it to a node. So we can click that, and then we know what you could do is say, grab that name, right? We'll just call this node nowadays, nadal. And then we can say over here, instead of doing the return function, we can do nadal dot drag, and that would be we'll call this a new variable called hi. Okay, variable called hi on node rigid body, because that's the one where this variable is that node. So we can do that, assign node there. Okay, that's the node, connecting those two. So now this script can access this node, and we'd want to do it as an export variable, so we can change the node that it's connecting to depending on how many touchscreen classes we have in the scene. And then we can go to here, var, add that variable in, and then we can change this variable's value by setting this one over here. Hopefully I'm explaining that in a way it makes sense to you. This node is that node because it's a variable that's a path that we assign in the script over here and connect it to there. And then we can change that any property on that node's value in here. But this return, like I already explained, so that's another way to do it. So this is another way to do it with the export variable, and that's a lot of work, and really you can just use return drag direction. But this could work for other situations that I can't think of right now. I have done that before for other things. So next we go down here on area, true, return drag direction. Return, you think of it as turning this function into a variable. So we pass it the arguments, the variables, we can use those variables to do stuff, and then we can return a value, return, and then the new variable we send it. So return turns the function into this variable. So to use that practically in kinematic body, which is our new player, this rigid body right here. Okay, so with that out of the way, let's look at how we're actually using it in the player node. So we have the node, the touchscreen class node right here. We pass it the arguments, and then we say self apply impulse, and that just applies, it pushes the node we're talking about, which in this case it's our self, and we give it an offset, which is 0, and then the direction we want to move it, which is right in this case, and then we multiply that by 130 on both vertices, vertexes, blah blah. I'm tired, and you know, since math, this remains 0, and this just goes to that number. So there's probably more efficient ways to write this, but it's too late, and no, not right now. So this function right here, touchscreen, this node is that variable. Get drag direction, we pass it the arguments, and it returns the value that we want. So this is the node we're talking about, TouchScreenClass. Then we run the function get drag direction, we pass it the arguments, and then return turns this function into that variable. So you can just replace this function with this variable. So think of this line of code, this return keyword on that script turns this function into this variable. So we're saying if drag direction equals vector 210. So that's what return does. That is kind of a lot for something. This video is kind of long. This video went on for way too long, but hopefully that gives a good explanation for what you're asking. And so thank you, Damien. You didn't ask for this video, but I'm giving it to you. Merry Christmas. This is the Christmas spirit. This isn't just for Damien, but everyone. If you want to support me and think of it as giving me a tip, you know, like at the coffee stand, I have a coffee link in the description. If you want to send me a tip, send a little appreciation my way, that would be incredible, and I'd be extremely thankful. God bless, have a very Merry Christmas, and good luck with your project, Damien Winter.